Hi, I'm Sam Drain, and you're listening to the American Superbike Show.
Thank you, Sam Drain. I'm Stitch Turner, and welcome back to the American Superbike Show, brought to you by WritingTimes.com. I did mention during a previous show that I am going to school for a certificate, and when the weather's nice outside now, I enjoy riding my GT73 to class, and I don't have to worry about parking, and it's really fun to ride. And not to get too far off into a tangent, but I also just put new upgraded wide aluminum pedals on mine, because I have big feet, and it gives me a little bit more space and a little bit more comfortable, but also they look really sweet because they're nice and bright blue, and just looks really good against the black bike. All right, anyways, moving on. There are no mailbag questions this week, and that is probably in part because I never posted a call for questions. As much as I am trying to get better at using social media to just not only grow the show, but I want to grow the involvement of listeners too. But I get a little busy sometimes and I forget to post it some weeks. And I'm kind of tempted to just say, put your questions anywhere and I'll still see it because, if you email americansuperbikeshow@gmail.com, I will definitely get it. And if you fill out the contact form that can be found on the americansuperbikeshow.com website, it will also send an email to that same exact email address. And anytime somebody comments or posts on the American Superbike Show subreddit, I also get an email to that very same inbox again, so that whatever method that you choose to contact me by, it's still just kind of going to the same place. But I do like putting up that post for questions every week because I want to just firmly communicate a welcome attitude to you guys just towards your contributions. And I want your contributions, especially for something I haven't really figured out how I'm going to kind of do this logistically yet. But we will have something exciting coming up this offseason. So remember during the time of MotoAmerica's in-house podcast, Paul Carruthers and Sean Bice would have an episode every offseason with MotoAmerica COO Chuck Aksland. And it was sort of an annual State of the Series episode. Well, I'm proud to say that that's something that will now be shifting over to the American Superbike Show. I will be scheduling time with Chuck in early October to record this, and I want you to be able to submit whatever questions you have beforehand. Now, as of right now, the best way to do that is any of the methods that I talked about before with the subreddit. You know what? As a matter of fact, I'm going to make a dedicated post for it right now while we were talking, so I don't forget. Create post. American Superbike Shows. Let's see here. Questions for Chuck. Okay. Here is a place we start gathering for MotoAmerica COO Chuck Aksland. Post. All right, it's up. All right, back to my show notes. Let's see here. So I went ahead and did that. It is done. We won't forget. You can also still use the email or the contact form on the website if you want, because it will go to the same place. But if you have a question, or heck, questions, plural, go ahead and submit them. Like I already have a Google Doc sheet created to start compiling this and the other ones that I have for areas that I want to talk about. Which, one more thing before moving on, by the way, I get it that sometimes people think they are funny or edgy or trying to prove God knows what. But now, here we have this opportunity. MotoAmerica as a series has so far, they have placed zero restrictions on me at all. I'm allowed to ask whatever I want whenever I have this sit down with Chuck Aksland. I'm obviously not going to waste his time or mine with somebody else's jokes or questions from somebody who's just trying to, intentionally be just plain difficult. Like, we don't have time for that. So I will be kind of I'm not going to guarantee that just because you submit a question, it will be read, but I would like to have more questions from you guys than from me, because let's face it, that's the best way for this series to continue to get better. Now on with the show. As far as I'm aware, there is no real news this week. I will give a heads up that this Thursday on the website, I will have a short piece about Caden Brown. I've just been really impressed by this kid. He's visibly grown this year. He had this initial goal of just qualifying at Daytona, and now he's coming off of his best finish of 7th place at VIR. And he's done all this by only running a partial schedule, in between those 2 rounds. Caden and the Two Bones racing team, his dad runs the team, and now they're also going to be at the final round at New Jersey. And it's going to be nice to see them have this opportunity to keep that momentum going into the offseason and hopefully keep getting some positive results. Speaking of the website, having 2 things a week on there every single week means that I'm pretty much shooting to have those things up on Tuesday and Thursday. I think pairing that with the regular podcast every Wednesday is a pretty good way to get through the middle of the week. I'm also hoping to maybe be able to change my schedule just a little bit and start recording on Tuesday nights. That way the show will still be available once again on Wednesday morning like it used to be, but there's no real guarantees on that. Part of the reason why I'm not really sure if I'm going to do that is I am just a little bit concerned that by moving up another day, it may mean that I just start missing more of the news that comes out that week. So we'll just have to see how these things go. Nothing is set in stone. I'm pretty sure some people will also notice that this week, the podcast and one of the website pieces are pretty close to the same thing. That won't always be the case, but a time like now when we have a gap between races, it can be a pretty helpful tool besides just, producing empty content. And that's especially true this week because, I did just write this big and fancy long form article that's like 3,000 words long. And so I can kind of now use the podcast here as sort of an avenue to sort of just, explain what brought me to produce something, especially from that sort of point of view. And for starters, it really did just originate from simply asking Google one day, what is the record for most riders winning a race in a Superbike season? We had 5 different winners at the point that I asked the question. And then Loris Baz went on to win race 3 at VIR. So now we have 6 different winners. And so I kind of figured we had to be getting close. And so I looked it up, and then I was reminded about that 2024 season where 7 different riders won a race that year. And that also just kind of reminded me, looking back at just a few years ago, about how I really do think that there is a dividing line in the competitiveness in the history of Superbikes for MotoAmerica. I put that line the previous year in 2023 because that's the year that Cam Beaubier made his return from Europe. And it wasn't just that the almighty then 5-time champion Beaubier was returning, but he was going to be riding for someone else other than the dominant team that was at Yamaha. It was the first time in forever that there was an honest-to-goodness question before the year started, what team would be employing the Riders' Champion at the end of it. Now, Jake Gagne did go on and still won that title for Yamaha. But it was clear, though, from that first weekend of Road Atlanta, it was such an exciting weekend. I still remember it vividly. Just that attempted pass by Josh Herron, that wasn't really, not an attempted pass. The way he had to save it coming out of the kink of the back stretch in Road Atlanta would just be something that, I will always be amazed for that he accomplished that for the rest of my life. Anyways, but that race weekend, it's a clear line to me of when, the depth of the Superbike field just started to increase rapidly. And even last year, Yamaha and Ducati each won 7 races, while BMW was able to win 6 races with Cam Beaubier. That's a pretty impressive, spread. It's pretty even. Also, during these last few years, though, at this same time, manufacturer support, it's easily been just the highest since MotoAmerica has taken over the management of AMA's professional road racing series. We have the following legit Superbike programs. Orange Cat Racing. They have a full factory-supported program for 2 bikes, and that is something we could never say about a BMW team before this year. When Tytler Cycle was the lead BMW team, Cameron Beaubier was always on a full factory superbike built by BMW's in-house factory motorsport shop, Alpha Racing GmbH in Germany. Now, we're going to use therapy words here, and just in case, every podcast is someone's first. My therapy words are: I think, I feel, and I know. I think means that this is something I think in my mind. I feel means I didn't just come up with this on my own. I hear some things about it, but not enough to be definitely sure and positive and say the last category I know, and that is something I know confirmed, for sure. So using the therapy words. I think JD Beach was never on a bike that was built like his teammates. And I also feel like PJ Jacobsen was, I know PJ Jacobsen was riding something built completely different than what Cam Beaubier was riding in that when PJ won his first Superbike race on a BMW. And I also know for a fact that Corey Alexander was never on anything more than what was really just a glorified stock 1000 machine. And that's not an insult to Corey. He did wonders on that bike considering the level that it was built to. Now, I know all this because in that season, that was the same year that the World Superbike transmissions were allowed to be used in MotoAmerica. And those new World Superbike transmissions, in a typical motorcycle transmission, you have first gear, then neutral, and then second, third, fourth, and on from there. With the World Superbike transmissions, it has neutral, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and there is a physical lever lockout to keep you from shifting into first or back into neutral once you select first gears. And that's to try and prevent, add a little bit of safety and prevent false neutrals. Well, for that season, when it was first allowed to be used in MotoAmerica, you had to declare at the start of the season whether you were using that World Superbike transmission or the regular transmission that came on your motorcycle. And you were not allowed to switch back and forth once you made that declaration. Cam Beaubier's bike that was built by Alpha Racing in Germany had that World Superbike transmission, and when he did not finish the year because of injury, PJ or Corey, neither one of them were allowed to just switch over and start riding the full factory bike because they were already declared for one of the stock-based transmissions. And so they couldn't ride a bike with that World Superbike transmission. And that is part of why Tytler Cycles decided to just bring up Stefano Mesa instead and have him finish out the year on the third bike. Anyways, I have gone way down a rabbit hole. All right, today's Orange Cat team, it is 2 full-fledged factory-supported bikes built by Alpha Racing, and they also provide support technicians at every MotoAmerica round. Yamaha, they still have their 2-bike factory supported effort, and it's run by Attack Performance, and that's an arrangement that's now in its 7th year. Yamaha also has Strack Performance, and that team is performing at a factory level with Matthew Skolt sitting second in the championship, but I don't think that it's actually a factory supported effort from factory Yamaha. Warhorse HSBK Ducati Flow for Law, they are running 2 bikes again. A few years ago, they did one season as a 2-bike effort, and it had Josh Herron and Loris Baz, and both of them won races. But I think this time, when they running 2 bikes, is not going to be just a 1-year thing. Now, especially now, they're fielding one for full-time or for 6-time champion Cameron Beaubier and Benjamin Smith, who every time I ask somebody else about Benjamin Smith, the first words out of their mouth are, he's going to be a champion one day. Ducati's also represented by another team, and it's the uber professional Ray Hall Ducati Moto with XPEL team. They have one of the biggest and expansive footprints in the paddock that has a true professional level with their hospitality for sponsors and everything that really helps drive money into the MotoAmerica paddock. And right now they're running a single bike for PJ Jacobsen, but don't forget that PJ is someone who's really done things on the world stage. In 2018, he was the runner-up in World Supersport. He's capable of winning not only just races this year, he is capable of winning this championship in the future. And then next year, he's going to be teamed up with 2-time champion Josh Herron as part of a 2-bike effort. So that's going to be a really dangerous pairing to watch in the future. Also in this article, I pointed out to how just with the introduction of bikes with wings, it's led the Japanese manufacturers to finally just put out updated versions of their leader bikes. And Suzuki's finally going down that road themselves. And next year, they're going to have an all-new machine. And it's expected to help the factory-supported M4X Star Suzuki team just compete further towards the front, maybe even win races. The thing is, they're already doing a hell of a job with a really aged but well-developed motorcycle, and they're doing that with that starting point that they already have to work with. They're not going to get slower next year with a new bike. Even Honda, they've returned with the factory-supported effort again in North America, although I will admit, I do think that the Hayden Gilliam's, bike with the Real Steel Honda team, I don't think that they receive... I put it this way. I think they do receive the least amount of resources from the home factory compared to the other factory-supported teams. Once again, using therapy words, but I feel like the CBR 1000RR-R SP, I feel like it can no longer be just called a glorified stock 1000 machine anymore, but it also still doesn't quite feel to have the same development as the other machines yet, although it's still a work in progress. I should probably also admit and mention that I know absolutely nothing about the Jones Honda effort that's being piloted by Ashton Yates, and I should ask him more about it. He really is a nice guy. So we have depth in the quality of the riders in the field of Superbike, but we also have way more depth in the quality of the machines than I think we have had in over 20 years, to be honest with you. The one area we definitely have not been measuring up lately, it is success on the international stage. And you know what? I have to admit that this is the biggest area that I just don't really know what to do. I know that I mentioned in the written piece that I'm not really sure that Talent Cup is the answer. And I do mean that. The reason why, the Kramer APX 350 MA, it does seem to be a great training piece for young developing riders. But consistently having grids of less than 15 bikes makes me wonder if we really are providing opportunities for the young and talented riders out there to show what they really have. Junior Cup was massive fun. There's no denying that. There's no denying that. It was so fun, and there are still so many just Ninja 400s built that are all over the place that you have to make an active effort not to bring one home from a racetrack on accident. On a more serious note, I am confident that young riders and their parents could pick up a solid used Junior Cup bike that was ready to race, and they could do so for around $5,000. That's quite a low barrier to entry for a young, promising rider to begin their racing career. I think it was Martin Whitmarsh, the old team principal of the McLaren Formula One team. He said that the best car driver in the world is probably some farmer in China who's never had the opportunity to drive a car. If we don't have opportunities for young riders to come out and give it a shot and try, how are we going to find them? But we do need to be honest. Junior Cup wasn't really quite the answer either. Just because it was readily available doesn't mean it was a solid foundation for riders to learn how to make their way to MotoGP. Specifically, I have heard a lot in the past about how the chassis of those machines, they just weren't the stiffest bikes in the world. And sometimes those bikes could start flexing a lot and maybe start zapping some of your confidence away while you're trying to learn. I also really want to commend, though, I do really want to commend MotoAmerica for partnering with Corey Texter and his promotion company for running the Mini Cup National Finals and they had a big number of qualifying events and that covered just most of the geographic area of the country this year. Having that kind of pipeline designed to help get young riders transition their way up into Talent Cup is something that is already proving its effectiveness with last year's O'Valley GP 190 champ and Kinze Matsudaira. He's leading this year's Talent Cup standings. At the end of the day, do I really believe we're currently in something that will be remembered as like a quote-unquote golden age? No, not really. So then why did I go through, all this trouble just to do, some research and not just do this podcast, but write the article that I did? Well, one of the biggest reasons I did it is so many people just tend to hold on to their negative perceptions for longer than are really necessary. I do think that until we are able to develop talent again, once again, that is able to succeeding at every level of the motorcycle road racing pyramid, and not until do we get to that point can we really claim to be in the middle of any sort of such golden age. But I also think that even just approaching the question, I'm hoping that it just opens some eyes as to, we're not really that far away. And I do truly believe that the people in charge today are the right people to keep us on that path of getting there. All right, well, that's all for this week. You should celebrate getting through another week by buying yourself a dirt bike at ridingtimes.com. Use the promo code SBK5. Next week, we will be in what I'm thinking of calling Championship Month, although it sounds kind of dumb, and I don't really have any plans to do anything actually differently, besides just calling it Championship Month, but I don't know, man. Hashtag marketing. 2 MotoAmerica championships have already been decided for 2026, and that's Jasmine Noel winning the Royal Leinfeld Build Terrain race title, while Hank Vosberg has already claimed the Twins Cup title with a couple of races to go in that championship. With the races still to come, the Super Hooligans National Championship, it's going to be decided at COTA, and we will also take a peek next week's show about classes that will probably see their championship fight continue until the final round of the season at New Jersey Motorsports Park. I'm just excited to see how it all plays out. I love this sport, and I love sharing it with you this season, and I'm having a damn good time, and I hope you are too. Until next week, take care of each other. The theme song of the American Superbike Show is Who's Afraid of Virginia Wolf by the band Fay Ray off of their album I Love Everyone. A special thank you to No Idea Records, and thank you for listening.